the thing that makes me the most hopeful is all of the people that are waking up to what's going on in the world, and it's not just in Bitcoin, but it's everywhere now. There was a there was a Palestinian Israeli protest the other day, and the Israeli side and the Palestinian side were both chanting "fuck Joe Biden." That's beautiful, man. That's America. They both hated the president for totally different reasons. I mean, come on. If that doesn't make you hopeful that the American spirit is still alive, we're an unruly people. We're supposed to be unruly and free and dirty and unwashed and crass. That is the American ethic and ethos. Live free, baby, or die. Okay?
Greetings and salutations, my fellow plebs. My name is Walker, and this is the Bitcoin Podcast. The Bitcoin time chain is 841831, and the value of one Bitcoin is still one Bitcoin. Today's episode is Bitcoin Talk, where I talk with my guests about Bitcoin and whatever else comes up. Today, I have two guests returning to the show at the same time for episode 69 of the Bitcoin Podcast, Preston Pysh and American Hodl, or Hodl. I love these dudes. They're great guys, and I know you're going to love this episode. It is a banger, as the kids say. If you're interested, go back and check out the original conversations I had with both these guys. You can find them linked in the show notes. The three of us covered a bunch of topics today because, frankly, there's a lot of shit going on right now. We talk about all of the shit that's going on right now, and we also talk about why there are a lot of reasons to be hopeful. Before we dive in, just a heads up that you can find the links in the show notes for discounts on the Bitcoin-only BitBox02 hardware wallet from BitBox Swiss, and on 5G SIM cards from Cloaked Wireless that protect you from SIM swap attacks. The promo code for both is Walker. If you'd rather watch this show than listen, head to the show notes for links to watch on YouTube, Rumble, and now on Noster. But if you're like me and you prefer to just listen to the audio, I highly recommend you check out fountain.fm. Not only can you send Bitcoin to your favorite podcasters to give value for value, but you can earn Bitcoin just for listening to this show. And if you're already listening to the Bitcoin Podcast on Fountain, consider giving this show a boost or creating a clip of something you found interesting. I really appreciate it. Finally, if you are a Bitcoin-only company interested in sponsoring another fucking Bitcoin podcast, hit me up on social media or through the website bitcoinpodcast.net. Without further ado, let's get into this Bitcoin talk with Preston Pysh and American Hodl. Hodl. Hello, welcome. This is a podcast. We're all here, three of us. I've never done a three-way podcast like this before. It's my first time. So I appreciate you guys both being here, coming back onto another fucking Bitcoin podcast to join me for this auspicious moment. It's episode 69. So, wow. Could it be better?
There's a really good Lonely Island song called Three Way.
I was gonna say, since it's Walker's first time, we promise to be gentle.
Yeah, you know? Well, thank you guys for that. I mean, you're so considerate, honestly. Well, this episode came about because somebody had put together a really nice mashup on Noster of your one of your rants from the episode we recorded together, and Preston, a recent show that you'd done. I don't remember exactly which show it was, but it was a pretty sweet mashup and got me fired up, and I was like, what if they both came on at once? Like, what would happen? What would be the result of that? So here we are today. Thank you both. I'm stoked for this because there's a lot of things going on right now. I was just actually I was making a list before this because I was like, let me just figure out like all the things that have happened like in the last couple weeks alone. And I was going down and it was like, okay, yeah, Bitcoin halving, that was nice. Preston, I saw you were in El Salvador for that, which looked just lovely. We had the FISA expansion of warrantless surveillance. Hooray. We had the Samurai wallet creators indicted and arrested for all their whirlpooling. Hong Kong ETFs, hooray! America sending billions more to fund foreign wars. Roger Ver arrested and charged with exit tax evasion, not extortion tax, excuse me. Let's see, Bitcoin 58K gang proved right yet again. Honestly, like these guys, they're seeing the future or something. The yen is trading like a shit coin. Coinbase finally integrates Lightning, yay, proof that bullying works, so keep bullying out there. Which is also just amazing because it's like I've been told that Lightning doesn't work, and yet somehow Coinbase integrated it. So it's like, how did that happen? Sailor announced MicroStrategy Orange, and I think there's a lot of interesting reactions to that I've seen from people who don't understand that you can do whatever you want on Bitcoin. Yellen admits she's worried about the deficit. Powell gives a kind of a dovish press conference, and my favorite quote from it was he says, I don't see the stag or the flation, which with regard to stagflation, which is like about as funny of a joke as a corrupt central banker can make. Let's see. Oh, just a couple hours ago, Wasabi announced that they are going to block U.S. citizens and residents from visiting their websites and using their wallet and related products. And did I miss anything? And that's just like the last couple of weeks. I think I about rounded it up. Is there anything else to add to that list of shenanigans?
Not that I can think of.
I would summarize, based on everything you just said, I would summarize with the U.S. is getting very scared of payments. And it seems like store of value with the approval of the ETFs and the legal precedence that was set there was almost like this moment where it's like, all right, we're not going to win the store of value battle. So now let's just point all of our energy towards payments. We cannot allow layer 2 payments to take hold like store of value is taking hold. And so I think that's the battleground at this point.
Yeah, I would say you could also summarize it as the regulatory clarity that everybody was looking for. It's here. It's here, and it sucks. This is
crystal clear
clarity, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting. Do you guys think that it's genuinely often in Bitcoin, we or Bitcoiners, myself guilty as charged, we refer to the they, the them, the men behind the curtain, the central bankers, the bankers in general, the psychopaths or sociopaths in government, the ones pulling the strings. And sometimes it's easy to think that these things are very much different actions are concerted efforts, like coordinated efforts, conspiracy, if you will, in the literal definition of conspiracy. Oftentimes things just happen as far in terms of a coincidence. Do you think this is one of those times, or does this feel like a genuinely concerted effort to throw, there's just a lot of stuff seems to be happening all at once, too much for coincidence?
I think it's very coordinated. I think that the coordination is happening with Wall Street, large cap banks, the JP Morgans, all the big ones. And I think that at least against the payment side, because they're looking at it and they definitely understand. They understand. Maybe the government, actors that are implementing the things that they're paying them behind the scenes to do. Might not deeply understand what's taking place, but I think that the big bankers definitely understand how important not losing the payments front is for them to try to continue to have a stranglehold on the printing press and just what they've benefited for the last 100 years. So I think that they're the ones that were behind Warren and the FinCEN proposal that happened before Christmas and all of those antics. If you think that that's happening because these politicians are there are actors with very deep pockets behind these politicians that are pushing them in these directions and trying to get them to orchestrate everything that you're seeing playing out. The problem that they're going to run into is with enough time, the technology is going to just continue to chip away at these moats that they've had for all these, since time immemorial. And it's a losing battle. All they can do is just kind of slow it down, though. And I think that what we're seeing with some of the stuff with FinCEN and basically them trying to divide the payments into KYC'd, custodied solutions versus non-custodial solutions that don't require KYC is kind of the divide that you're seeing taking place right now. Is in the long run is not going to work. Like it's not going to be competitive, because it's just the technology is going to continue to chip away at it. Now it might take another decade more than what it would have, and I don't know what the timeline is. I'm just throwing that out as a random number. What would have maybe been a 3-year thing is maybe a 10-year thing or whatever. It's just going to take that glide slope out further because they're battling it. But and maybe there's a case that maybe it accelerates it. I don't know. I'm curious what Hodl thinks on it.
Yeah, I think it feels coordinated as well. I mean, I think the ETFs really shook a lot of trees in DC and in New York, and basically people were like, "Holy shit! Look at the popularity, look at the demand for this." And I'd love to get Preston's thoughts on like the macro picture, because like the stagflation point is interesting because it seems like there's a rush to close the exits right before they do something, and I'm not really adept enough to know what that something is. But obviously, Bitcoin is the biggest possible exit, and so right now nothing has happened that actually like shuts Bitcoin off. But especially like the on ramps and off ramps. But there's fear. They're chumming the waters and they're creating a lot of fear surrounding Bitcoin. And if you're a casual person who has a retail brokerage account, you were possibly thinking about buying the ETFs or whatever, and you're reading these headlines, it's like boom, 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 and you would. I think a lot of people who are just casually browsing the newspaper or whatever would just go, yeah, I don't know if this is worth it. Something's going on here. I'm going to stay away for right now. And it seems like that's the intended effect,
Which I think is totally by design for them to accumulate. For those that are in the know of what's taking place here, it just gives them an opportunity to accumulate more. But yeah, I mean, I agree with Hodl. I think the macro backdrop is getting just fascinating. What's happening in Japan with the yen devaluation. When you look at their credit markets, so when you look at the entire bond yield curve of Japanese bonds, I mean, it's selling off through levels that we haven't seen in decades, and they're just not able to get the inflation under control, and nobody is. And I think that when we look at Japan, it's kind of the canary in the coal mine because those were always the lowest rates. And when you currency adjusted the yields for their bonds over there, so like they might be yielding something really low in Japan, and you'd get a higher yield here in the U.S. But whenever you adjusted them for the currency differences, they were actually kind of at par, despite the yield differences that you were seeing. So when we're looking at that yield over in Japan and it's selling off, it's really kind of between that, the U.S., the U.K. Those are the markets that are really kind of driving the credit sell off, and they just don't have it under control. And if we start punching through lower lows in these credit markets after seeing the most disgusting bond sell off in over a century. Let me tell you, that's going to be quite devastating from an impairment standpoint on all of this fiat that's in the system. And it's like, if you're a fixed income person and you're seeing even deeper selling off in something that's a century-sized sell-off, bear market, that has the potential to really turn into cascading contagion really fast. And it's like, where does all that buying power go? So like as people are pulling more and more resources and funds out of this fixed income market, where does it go? It has to go into something that has some type of scarcity to it. So that's Bitcoin, that's gold, that's commodities are really hard to do because of the supply and demand that's constantly fluctuating, but those prices are going to go higher. Any type of business equity-wise that makes money, that has some type of moat, it's going to get bid even more. Even if the PE is at 40 or 50, it's going to even get bid more because it represents some type of scarcity because they don't have to issue more shares. So like that's where all this buying power is going to go out of the fixed income. And when I'm looking at the thresholds that we're at, like we are pressing up on where we were at. I'd have to look at a chart just to kind of give you an idea. So the sell-off really kind of hit its peak in the October 2023 timeframe, and where we're at right now, we're starting to get back to some of those lows right now. And if they punch through those lows, like watch out, and price wise, watch out. Like it's going to get really spicy. Yeah, and I think we could totally see that by the end of the year.
Yeah, and Preston, what does the financial repression scheme look like if that is the backdrop? Let's say like 6-8 months from now.
Well, I think Luke Roman's been beating the drum that the dollar is going to have to get devalued like immensely going into the end of the year. And when we look at the elections that are coming up, I tend to agree with them that like that's going to probably be the lever that they pull. They're going to devalue the dollar tremendously, and that's usually a pretty good thing for Bitcoin when they're devaluing the dollar pretty hard. So I would expect that well before we start getting into November. So maybe a little bit of chaos between now and the beginning of the summer, but then I think once we get into the summer, you're going to see the dollar just get devalued like immensely.
It almost seems to me like the Fed's game plan right now, as much as they have a game plan ever, is to kind of try and confuse markets a little bit. Like they're really trying to, it seems like they don't want to pre-choreograph their moves. They want people, that's why Jerome Powell's wording, like if you actually listen to the language and read those transcripts, it's all just like, it's nonsense. Like it's just kind of like, well, we could go left, but we could also go right. And at the same time, we could stay right where we are.
What's interesting, Walker, is somebody was telling me this the other day that like Jerome Powell goes off script more than either of his previous two predecessors. So Yellen and Bernanke were both very on script, and Powell goes off script in an attempt to jawbone and financially manipulate the markets, right? And so the reason he's going off script is so that he can get those reactions, and that's why he's speaking out of both sides of his mouth, because he wants to see what the psychological reaction is going to be on the market. He wants to affect it in that manner.
So Walker, what I would tell you is it's actually a very astute observation that you have with respect to them just like creating almost like it's almost like they're trying to cipher what the real message is so that people have no clue what they're going to actually do. But when it comes to push and shove, whatever, acronym or whatever catchphrase you want to use, I think that when we look at the election coming up and we just kind of look at the backdrop, we look at how sick the fixed income market is, they have to do something, and they're going to have to. I think the only lever that they have left to pull is the currency. So I think they're saying all this stuff. I think it's just meaningless. I think it's just ciphering whatever the real message is so that people are not trying to act on it and trade it. And
that's the thing.
It's so broke.
Well, like we know it's, and of course, the Federal Reserve is a public-private institution, which is naturally separate from our elected representatives and never at all influenced by them, nor do they do any influencing of their own, of course.
But that Walker, you literally had Biden go out. This was like 3 weeks ago, and he made the comment about how they were going to cut within, like, I've never, ever seen a president come out and even hint at such a thing. And this was literally in a press conference. So, I mean,
I did not see that. That's wild.
Yeah, this was like I would say 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah, Zero Hedge was sharing the clip all over Twitter, and yeah.
I must have been on Nostr that day, but no, and that's honestly pretty incredible. But just like to Powell, I mean, it's clear that again he's trying to just obfuscate intentions as much as possible.
Yep.
But at the same time, even when you hear the people in the press corps that are asking him questions, they're kind of like, well, aren't you maybe going to need to change some things here? Mm-hmm. And it's also funny because there's a phrase that they use all the time, that Powell uses all the time. He says, we'll look at the totality of the data. And I find that phrase to be so hilarious because, of course, that's impossible. You can't look at the totality of the data in a market. Like no one person, no group of people, unless you have honestly like a CBDC, and everything is completely on that CBDC rails, and you have supercomputers to be able to run all of this data, maybe an AGI could look at the totality of the data, but it is impossible for humans in any context to look at the, quote, totality of the data. It's hubris.
They started saying that, I would say 5 or 6 years ago, just off the top of my head. They started using this totality term. And back, if I remember right, when they started using this term, it was in this context of like everybody was looking at the metrics that they always use, and they're like, they have to raise rates at this point, and they didn't want to raise them yet at whatever, right? And so they came out and they started saying this totality term because it gave them the wiggle room to just kind of make it up as they go and to just use whatever metric they want to like actually pluck to say this is the reason why we didn't raise or we did raise. And it just gave them more flexibility to do whatever the heck they wanted.
I mean, that's kind of interesting historical context, and that it's clearly that attempt by let's say fiat economists and fiat financial planners to have their physics envy is showing. They're trying to say, well, if only you had access to all of the data we have and had as gigabrains as we do, to be able to look at the totality of it, then you'd see that what we're doing is, of course, completely rational.
Yeah.
But the absurd thing is that it's like you have to have a really short memory, like really short, to have any faith in the Fed at all. Like even I'm talking about the normal person just going about their day to day. Maybe they pay attention to the Fed a little bit. You don't need to know much to probably have seen a clip of every higher up person in the finance world and in the central banking world across the world, from Lagarde to Bailey to Jerome Powell to Yellen, saying it's transitory. Inflation's transitory. And then, it's in Lagarde's words, it's a hump that will go down. And then of course, later on they say, well, by transitory, we really meant that it's going to be stickier than expected. And it's like, well, that's the complete opposite. And then, of course, by stickier than expected and transitory, what we really meant was that, well, prices are never going to go down. We're never going to have disinflation. We're just going to have a slower increase in year over year change. But it's still we're going to get it back to our arbitrary 2% that we've set up as the perfect amount of theft per year that you won't entirely notice. But I feel like, and you see a lot of these videos shared by, like, I think Wall Street Silver shares a lot of them, like pulled from TikTok. And a lot of people just starting to really ask the right questions because they're so frustrated, and they're like, why can't I afford to just live? Like, I'm working, I work a decent job, maybe you're a nurse, maybe you're whatever you might be, like you work a good job and still you're struggling to make ends meet. And people saying, well, this isn't how it's supposed to be. Like, I followed the plan. I did what I was told, and it's just getting more and more expensive. And, it seems like, and this is something I remember Jeff Booth actually said in one of the first chats I had on here. It was right before your chat, actually. He said, like, the only way to resolve all of these very obvious problems in the system is to reset it by going to war. And divide. Like, the only way that you're really going to get that reset is if you have, kind of a, not a force majeure, but a human-induced force majeure, where you say, well, these are extraordinary circumstances and they call for extraordinary measures. I mean, do you think we're getting near that point? Because what happens next? Like, what happens after this next election? Yeah,
I think that historically it was always the perfect excuse to just blame it on, well, we had to defend ourselves, or if we didn't do these things, well, then we were going to have security issues within our boundaries of our nation. So they would then go to war, and then they can blame all the excess spending on the fact that they went to war, which then gave them an excuse as to why the currency exploded. I think this time around is very different from a historical context. And I think it's very different because there's countries that are wrapped up into this giant fiat scheme that the developed nations of the world, the G7s of the world, have played extraordinarily well and have benefited extraordinarily well for decades. And I think that there's a lot of victims of this policy, this fiat policy that these really big nation states have benefited from. And I think a lot of them are figuring this out, and then I think a lot of them are going to opt out. And I think that's going to be the moment that Bitcoin is really going to shine. And I think that Bitcoin is this gauge that allows the rest of the world to actually see the debauchery that's happening with these fiat currencies. And so, are we going to see some of these countries go to war? Maybe. Are we going to see all of them go to war? Of course not. And so there's going to be beneficiaries of this reset. And, we've been having the WEF elites say that we're the Great Reset. The Great Reset has been the theme for a decade at this point. And you know what? We are going to get a reset. But it's not going to be the reset that they think it's going to be. And maybe it is for them, but not for the whole world, right? This reset is going to go down so differently than they're expecting, and that they're trying to plan. Like, it was literally called the plandemic, and we don't have to go into what everybody's opinion is on that. But I can tell you, looking at the charts and looking at all the interesting things that were happening in 2020, it was no surprise to me that we were seeing some of the things happening in the background that are the perfect excuse as to why we need to debase the money and do all these types of things. And now you can just add the war and all this stuff that we're seeing, whether it's in the Ukraine, Russia, over in Israel with Palestine, Iran, you name the country. The thing that I keep bringing up in interviews that I find really fascinating, Walker, is every country that is an enemy of the United States, a quote unquote enemy of the United States, they're all net producers. When you look at their local economies, every one of those economies that are the enemies of the United States are all net producers. They are sending raw materials and services in excess out of their countries, more going out than what they're consuming. When you look at all of our allies at the U.S., they're all net consuming nation states that have the power of the printing press. And so when people are trying to understand why this scenario is playing out and why we're at each other's throats, you don't have to look too far to kind of like get to the root of what the problem is. And it's the unit of account, the number that's being used to exchange value and energy with each other. So it's gonna play out. There's gonna be kinetic activities that do happen between certain nations. I would argue that's already taking place, but it's more in a sensing standpoint right now between many countries. You have some full-blown combat activities over in the Ukraine happening, and it's just a matter of how much that's going to flare up before the leaders of these countries figure out that there is an off-ramp to this debauchery and insanity. And you know what? It takes inspirational leadership. It takes leaders that can step up and say, hey, here's a solution to this massive problem that we can escape if we just take courageous decisions and actually understand what the heck we're talking about. But for many of these countries, they're just gonna, the leadership is very weak and very stupid and not thinking about things from a first principle standpoint as to what the root of the problem is. And unfortunately, they're going to probably get a lot of people killed in the process. I pray that's not the scenario. As somebody who's been in combat, let me tell you, there's nothing pleasant about it. There's nothing pleasant about it. And, it's a time for strong leaders to step up, very ethical leaders to step up, and very informed and intelligent leaders to step up and find the off-ramp to save not only themselves, but all the people that they represent inside of their nation.
It's beautifully well said, Preston. And, just speaking of leaders who do appear to be breaking the mold that we've been used to of ineffectual, soft, just generally weak leadership across the world, you were recently in El Salvador. Mm-hmm. And that was your first time there, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. I mean, personally, I had the pleasure of going there a couple of times in 2022, and just loved it. Heard great things from everyone I talked to, and of course, I didn't talk to every single person in the country, There are always going to be people who are unhappy with what's going on. But the people I talked to were really happy with the leadership that they had. I also just saw, maybe you saw this clip of Bukele bringing basically his whole cabinet into a meeting and saying, I'm going to investigate every single one of you for corruption because I know my hands are clean, but my legacy will be tainted if the people I surround myself with are dirty. And I thought that was a pretty cool move. But I'm curious if we see, I mean, we've seen Milei in Argentina. We've seen Bukele in El Salvador. Two countries where there has been a massive amount of, let's say, obvious corruption, because I think there's corruption everywhere.
Yep.
The degree to which it is really obvious varies. Like, we have plenty of corruption in America. We're very good at hiding a lot of it behind a nice veneer. But I'm curious if you see, kind of your experience in El Salvador, take on Bukele and how that positions even a small nation like El Salvador to move up in the global rankings. And then do you start to see that model expand and be picked up by more countries? Because they say, well, look at the results. They speak for themselves.
One of the things that I'm most impressed with Bukele, and I am by no shape of the imagination an expert on Bukele, but the one thing that I will say I'm very impressed with is how he stood up to the IMF and World Bank and is trying his best to break out of that model. Because if you're even if you're a mid-sized country, trying to break free from that scheme, and let me tell you, it is a scheme of schemes that the IMF and the World Bank have pooled on all of these countries to get them in debt as much as they possibly can so that they can extract out any and all valuable natural resources out of those local countries and then just continue to roll the debt to make it to the point where they can never, ever repay it. That's the game. And so Bukele not only recognized this, but then had the courage to go toe to toe against this massive system. And I think that is one of the most important things that I've seen him do. Then anybody that is familiar with El Salvador, they would say that his stance on corruption is also magnanimous. I'm not an expert on what he's done from a getting rid of corruption standpoint, but from what I've heard, it's pretty incredible. And so I would argue those are two very important things, that courageous, inspirational leadership has been and again, I don't know him personally, but those two things I think are very courageous.
I would agree with that. And first of all, I'd like to welcome back Hodl, or Hodl, or Hodl. Honestly, I think we might need to debate later if it's Hodl or Hodl,
it's Hodl.
And if it's
Hodl. Yeah.
Oh, so
you sound like listen. I like you. I like you, Walker.
I like you
so
too.
much, but you sound like a fucking retard when you say it the other way. I'm just saying.
Do you say Noster? Do you say Noster or Noster?
Noster.
Now I found the problem. Okay. No, it's okay.
Is it GIF or GIF?
Yes.
If you say GIF, I swear to God, I will punch the screen.
I certainly won't be saying that then. I can't have you doing that. All right, we'll save this debate for later. But welcome back. I'm glad the technical difficulties have mostly resolved.
I'm back on mobile. I found where there's a will, there's a way, Walker. I'm back.
That's beautiful. Just problem solving. But Preston, I just wanted to bring you up to speed here. I was just asking. We were talking about just the need for strong leadership in the times to come, and how countries like El Salvador under Bukele have clearly, like, if we're just looking at the results, they have done what people previously would have thought impossible, both from the standpoint of getting out from under the boot of the international U.S.-led organizations like the IMF, which are modern-day monetary colonialists and extractors, and it's disgusting. And then also from the perspective of just genuinely establishing rule of law in a country where there was different sets of laws depending on who you were connected to. And I think that that's actually such an important part, or an important point, is law itself. And this idea that, like, the only legitimate purpose of the law, like the law at its core, is supposed to protect private property, to protect individual private property. That's why the law exists. The purpose of government is to enforce the law. Thus, the purpose of government is to organize for the collective defense of private property. Now, it's to make sure that you are safe, your property is safe from plunderers, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But we've seen a perverted law, a law that has then put the people who are in charge of enforcing the law in a position of being plunderers themselves. And that's a really sick and twisted perversion. And it seems to me that what Bukele has done, and it seems what Milei is trying to do through slightly different means, is to set up the rule of law again. Now, I know there's a lot of pushback on someone like Bukele as well, because the way in which he went about this was, rounding up people with their gang signs tattooed on their faces or their necks, and probably, caught a few people in that net that maybe shouldn't have been. And I hope that those people will be, obviously dealt with in all the fairness of the law. But I think that you see a massive difference, a stark contrast between what he's doing in El Salvador with genuinely trying to bring back the defense of people's private property from what was the gangs there, to what is happening in America, what's happening in Canada, what's happening in Europe, where you start to see that crimes are not punished. Like so many videos of lootings or just people robbing stores. There's, in major cities, and there's no repercussions for these sorts of things. And I think that what America did really well was have an established rule of law that was supposed to be fair, and we had checks and balances. And it seems like there's a lot of perversion of the law happening, and it's one of those times where the people closest to the money printer know that time's kind of running out, and it's just like a cash grab at this point to say, how much can I get my hands on to secure my own legacy and for my family before the party stops, before the music turns off, and everybody tries to sit down in their chair, and you got to find one that has the most bags of cash under it. I don't know. I'd just love to hear from you guys. Like, I want America to be salvageable, and I think that it is, but I don't know what kind of change is required in order to get us off the path that we're on now. And is that change, does Bitcoin fix this? Is it an incentives problem? Is that change, does it have to start, at a local level? Is it possible to make those changes from the top down? Are we just fucked? Discuss.
I think the two things, one of the things that we were talking about earlier was, is this coordinated against Bitcoin or is it not? Are they trying to shut off the exits? Are they trying to, destroy peer-to-peer currency? Like, all of that stuff, I think, is directly correlated to the crisis that's happening at the southern border, the lax, policies on crime in liberal cities and in sanctuary cities and in blue states. It's the most obvious thing in the world to me that, like, if you want to put in a totalitarian, dictatorship or authoritarian regime or oligopoly, you need to have the people request it. And what's the easiest way to get the people to request it is to terrorize them into requesting it, right? I mean, we've seen this playbook plays out over and over and over again. And so it's an attempt to consolidate power. They want to terrorize us into sort of obedience and, pacification and requesting safety. Please save us from the problem that you created. I mean, to me, like, all of those things are anti-American. A lot of the leadership we have in America is anti-American. A lot of the things that people think and believe in popular sentiments are anti-American. All of that is true, but we're not fucked. And here's why we're not fucked, is because we still have the world's best technologists, best and brightest minds. We are still building the future, even if the people who, are running the country right now are intent on destroying that future. We're building it anyway, okay? And we don't give a fuck. And so we're building these parallel systems. We're trying to enshrine America for another 100 years. We need to clean up the corruption. I mean, the corruption is rampant. Like, nobody wants that. Like, there's a ETF now that's tracking Nancy Pelosi's trades that's outperforming the S&P 500. So you don't even have to track Nancy's trades yourself. You can buy this ETF. I think it's called NANC. It tracks Nancy and Paul Pelosi's trades, and it outperforms the broad market index funds. Are you fucking kidding me? This is the kleptocracy that we're living in, and everybody can see it. It's so obvious to everybody. Everybody knows it, and yet we all just sit there and we're in, like, some sort of malaise where it's just like this nihilism is washing over us. We're all like, I don't know, man, everything's fucked, man, blah blah blah, man, whatever, dude. And I don't feel that way. I feel optimistic because we own the future. Owning Bitcoin means we own the fucking future. Okay, and we have a seat at the table, and we're gonna get to say how things operate. And the way I want things to operate is the way the fucking U.S. Constitution says they should fucking operate. The end.
So
Amen.
Walker, on my side, I agree with everything that Hodl just said. This is the only thing that I would, I guess this is a pushback. When I think about moving forward, I think of like the United States and like all the people inside there, all the companies inside of it. They're almost like neurons in a brain, and the way that they organize themselves and the way that they, the incentives that they've been wired to perform in the economy. When I think about what these neurons have been wired to do over the past 80 years, they have been incentivized to play this game in a way that you get as close to the money printer as possible. You get levered up as much as you possibly can. You leverage these political appointees that you then put into place. You vote, if you're in defense, you vote money into your district by, building F-35s and all these types of things. This is the game that everybody's accustomed to. This is the game that they know. It's akin to a person using heroin nonstop for a decade straight and then saying, we're going to get them off the heroin, and then they're going to just do this. They're going to play this free and open market thing where the fittest survive and the ones that are the weakest just kind of die, and there's no political favors or any of this kind of stuff, right? For me, and when I'm looking at whoever the strongest heroin addict was in this old legacy system from a country standpoint, that country is going to probably struggle the most in the transition, just because of how their quote unquote brain has been wired, how the economy has been wired to function, and the incentives inside of that country have been wired to function. So another thing that I would say is, if you were a country that has been dealing with double-digit inflation, you become a master of controlling your expenses and trying your darndest to be able to create value. And so once that inflation subsides, it's almost like you were out there running around the track and you had like all these extra weights on you, and then all of a sudden the weights start coming off and you can really rip around the track. But for people that have had the luxury of not dealing with, what was the inflation here in the U.S. for the most part, relative to, and this is very relative to all these other countries in the world. Well, we were basically in the lap of luxury. We weren't running around the track with like these weight suits on us. And so I think that when you combine these things and you kind of think of it in these terms, who should be the countries that struggle the most with the transition? Just looking at it very objectively. And as an American and as a person that had served in the military in this country, let me tell you, nobody wants to see the United States recover from all this more than me. But I can also look at things very objectively and look at them in terms of like how nature operates. And I'm saying the U.S. should probably be, it should probably be pretty dang hard on them. It should be really hard on Europe. Like some of these really advanced economies that are completely wired to operate in this old legacy system and the incentives of it are going to probably struggle immensely with the transition. One other thing that I would tell you is the countries that have a lot of physical infrastructure for this legacy system, that transition to this new system where efficiency is going to be king. The countries that are building that infrastructure for the very first time from the ground up and can do it in a very thoughtful and efficient kind of way and not re-engineer stuff that was already there and repurpose it, I think are going to actually have a huge advantage from a trend standpoint going into the coming 10 to 25 years from now. So, and anyway, yeah. But yeah, go ahead, Paul.
No,
sorry, I'm talking.
I totally agree that America is not going to be nimble in this transition, and we are going to be as slow and lumbering, and it is going to be as painful as Preston described. I believe all of those things are true, but I also believe in this sort of American, ethos that like America will try all the wrong things before it finally does the right thing. And that's, just the chaos of our, air quotes, democracy. And like, I think we're going through some sort of a big cyclical change in American life that is very similar to the cyclical change we went through at the turn of the Industrial Revolution, and now we have a digital revolution that's happening. And the American institutions that accept that digital revolution is happening are going to do well. So if you look at like the East Coast versus the West Coast, this is something like Balaji Srinivasan's talked about. The East Coast is just trying to consolidate their power, hang on to their little fiefdom. They're lashing out at anybody who doesn't agree with them or who, points out where they're hypocritical. And then the West Coast is just like, all right, I don't even want to participate in that game. I don't even play that game. We are going to build in cyberspace. And we're not fully aligned with the tech elites on the West Coast. In fact, many of them are shitcoiners, so we're like actually diametrically opposed to some of them. But spiritually, we are much more on their side than we are on the entrenched East Coast side. And so to me, as somebody who, is looking forward optimistically, I side with the new pioneers who are going to the new frontier, and the new frontier is cyberspace. And, basically it's like, okay, take the El Salvador example, right? El Salvador is going to be one of these nimble players in the digital economy, and they have a chance to be like a, South American Estonia, or even better, like a South American Monaco or something like that. And I believe that's going to happen for them. But El Salvador is not America. Let's not conflate the two things. It can never be America. It's not protected by the oceans. It doesn't have the Mississippi. It doesn't have the nuclear arsenal. It's not us. We're a totally different thing. And yeah, we're like slow and lumbering, and moving America is like moving an aircraft carrier. All those things are true, but we still have some of the best, most freedom-minded people in the world here. And a lot of these people who hate America and who are trying to run our society into the ground, frankly, they're 85 years old. What do they got? They can do this for 6 more years, maybe with the best drugs on earth. I mean, come on, their time is going to run out. I look around, and all my peers, all the young smart people, they're all building towards the libertarian, Bitcoin future. Some of them are building towards like the AI communist future, but hopefully that we'll have to see. Those two things are going to play out. I think that's the battle of the 21st century.
At the heart
drugs,
of it, Walker.
I was just going to say, speaking of drugs, whatever drugs Joe Biden is on, I think we could all use some, because whatever that shit is like next level. Yeah. No, sorry, Preston, go ahead.
For us to accelerate everything that Hodl just said, I completely agree with him. But to accelerate and to manifest the speed of the U.S. or you name it country to really kind of benefit from this transition into this new world, this reset, it's going to take a leader that is deeply intellectual, that understands what's taking place from a very broad standpoint. They have to have reach, and they have to have influence over other people within the country and other leaders within the country. They have to be ethical in order to help bridge this, and they have to be able to share this knowledge and this information in a way that gets it down to as many people as possible. This is the only way that you're going to be able to bridge this, is through sound, ethical, intelligent leadership. It's why I keep bringing it up as a theme, is because that's the only way you can accelerate it in you name it country.
Do you think, though, that starts, I mean, and I agree with that from an acceleration standpoint. But again, we've also acknowledged that America is slow and lumbering, especially, it seems, at the top of our political hierarchy. Mm-hmm. So is it, I think there's a good argument to be made for localism, for a, for lack of a better word, a decentralized approach to change, which I think you're already seeing happen, right? You're seeing that start to play out. You see the differences from one town to another in terms of maybe how they dealt with COVID policy. You see the difference from one state to another in terms of how they deal with border policy. You see the difference from one state to another in how they deal with taxes. So, and like that's good. Like, we should have differences between states in America, because that was the whole fucking point of America, was to have different states that were each able to operate in such a way that, if you don't like it in X state, you can move to Y state and you don't have to deal with X state's bullshit anymore. But I mean, do you see this kind of, because I agree, like, it would be lovely to have an actual inspiring and forceful and strong president that's not just trying to baffle everyone with bullshit or absolutely dementia ridden, to speak of a couple that I can think of that are going to be at the top of both tickets. I mean, do you think that we see that anytime soon? Do you think that RFK is that person? Do you think he has a legitimate chance on an independent ticket? Do you think that this is something we still need to wait a couple more cycles for?
It's not RFK.
Payne's usually the teacher in these scenarios. Yeah.
It's not going to be RFK. I mean, RFK is he's just not going to be the guy, unfortunately. I mean, I like him. He's a very principled guy. He reminds me of like Bernie Sanders with a functioning brain, Whereas Bernie seems to be missing he's a few crayons short of a full box. So yeah, it's not going to be what I think. If you're asking me who I actually think it's going to be, I think it's going to be a young, smart Mexican Republican, like the Mexican JFK, who hopefully we orange pill, and he's very pro Bitcoin and pro freedom. That's the guy I think is coming to like right the ship, because if you look at like the demographics that are shifting in America, we're going to get a Mexican president sooner or later, and Mexicans are actually very conservative. They're much more conservative than people think they are. They just don't have economic power yet, but like they're basically all Catholics who have 9 children. That's a conservative, my guy, right? So like there's going to be this sweeping sort of Reagan movement with like a young, good-looking, intelligent Mexican president at some point, and I'm fucking all for it.
I like that. That's going to be. I'm gonna take this clip and replay it when we get our first young, good-looking, based Mexican president. I look forward to it. I don't know, Preston. I'm curious your take too, though. Like, do you see this happening anytime soon, or is this again like you said? Payne's the best teacher, and I agree. Like, you get smart by force, not by choice, most of the time, and most of us are pretty fucking dumb. What's your take on
the fact that we still have most people in this country pointing at the other party? Tells me that there's a lot more pain on the horizon, because once they stop pointing at the other party and they realize that both parties are equally as corrupted, and that the solution is you got to suck the monetary energy out of the printing press. Once it gets to that, then I think we're going to be ripe for somebody to step in and kind of lead that charge, with that being the primary talking point, is that both sides. And you started getting this with some of the fringe candidates already, which tells me it's kind of coming, but you're not seeing it with the ones that are dominating either party. I think you're not going to get it this election. Maybe the next election you will.
I think, I was thinking about this just recently, actually, which is, I think that the world has gotten so complicated, and things are so specialized and esoteric. The average person you talk to doesn't know what an LLM is. They've never heard of it, right? It's a big deal that's sweeping through tech. They have no idea what that is. They don't know anything about Bitcoin. They don't know the difference between Bitcoin and a cryptocurrency. They just know that there's this sort of political theology that they can grab a hold of, and that can be like their dominant worldview, because they're missing an actual theology, right? And that political theology is, I'm a Democrat and Donald Trump is the most evil Hitler-esque character that's ever walked the face of this great nation, blah, blah, blah. Or, Donald Trump is the savior of this great nation, and how dare, the evil Democrats, blah, 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 all that shit, right? And it's a very easy, simple heuristic that people can use in order to subdivide the world and sort of go about their day. And so, unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to get to a place of like enlightenment where the average person goes, oh, you know what, my neighbor, he might have different beliefs, but he's a good person. That's like from a bygone era. That doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately.
Well, the average person is average, unfortunately, and and there's
I like that.
The average person is average, and depending if we're talking about a median here mode, but like 50% of people are below that average. If let's just slice it down the middle, right? Like let's take that middle human in the U.S. I love my fellow Americans, but in every country, like, it's a sad reality, but the majority of people are pretty dumb. And that's okay too. Like, you can be dumb and still be a really good person, because everything is relative. Being like, yes, and I am a fucking idiot relative to some of the absolute geniuses that I've met, because everything is relative, right? And a lot of the people that think they're absolute geniuses, the upper right hand side of the bell curve that's not quite at the if we're looking at the bell curve meme, like you get towards that upper right hand side, like those are the dangerous people, right? Those are the people that are just smart enough to know that they're smarter than average, but still not smart enough to actually be able to generate their own or like original and organic thoughts. They're still just repeating things that they've heard, right? And Hodl, to your point, Hodl, excuse me.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're gonna break me of this habit just right here in this chat. But anyway, to your point, like, yes, most people are not paying attention to the vast majority of like, earth-shattering things that are happening at any given time. Whether that be from a technological perspective, whether that be from a geopolitical perspective, from a monetary perspective as it intersects with technology, they're just trying to get through their day. Like they're just trying to get through their day. They're just trying to get home, get done with work, get home to their kids, lead a nice life and not be bled to death by inflation that is sucking them dry and making everything harder for them as they still work their ass off. And like that is the majority of people. And one thing that does give me hope is that even though the majority of people still don't see Bitcoin, they're starting to at least, and this I think when you dropped off, Preston and I were talking about this a little bit, but the majority of people or more people are starting to at least ask the right questions because the pain is getting to be so much that they can't just ignore it anymore. They can't just sweep it under the rug.
Right.
They don't have a way to rationalize it away anymore. They have to say, wait a minute, I know something is really wrong. I know something is really broken. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I know it's there. And so I'm going to, you know what, again, to your point, Preston, you get smart because of pain, right? You get smart by force.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people are getting smarter right now. They're starting to ask more questions. They're starting to do more research. And they're starting to realize that, wait a minute, maybe all of these red, blue, left, right talking points that I've been fed where every problem is blamed on the other side and every success is blamed or is given to our side, maybe a lot of that was kind of bullshit. Maybe there's something else at play. And that gives me hope. Like the more people start doubting and asking questions, the more hopeful I become that we actually have a chance. Cause like I may trash talk, quote, America a lot, but I want to be very clear that when I pick fun at or satirize or talk shit about America, I'm talking shit about our political and financial class. I'm not talking shit about American people. I'm not talking shit about American ideas because I love American ideas and American people. America is a young country that has done so much in such a short amount of time, and through its efforts has lifted most of the world out of poverty. And now has organizations which institute monetary colonialism like the IMF, but that's not the American people instituting that. That's not the American idea instituting that. That's un-American. That's anti-American. So I still have hope for America. I still love America. I want America to succeed. And I just hope we get smarter by force and by pain sooner rather than later. But
Totally.
I don't know.
You know what's interesting is thinking about pain and how pain is a forcing function. I was thinking about this the other day that basically like, the 4-year cycle or hodling through downturns or these brutal Bitcoin bear markets that we're all forced to experience, negative 90%, negative 80%. I think those are a forcing function that inspire us to be better individuals because you simply have to be better in order to make it through those crucibles because those crucibles are searingly painful. I mean, it's brutally hard. And if we had gotten into Bitcoin, whenever 2017 or before, whenever we all entered, and basically we just bought Bitcoin and went straight to $2 million, I don't think we'd be very good people, and I don't. I just don't think we would have earned it, right? And at least in this sense, we're forced to contend with like the reality of the markets as they are. There is no soft landing for Bitcoiners, right? There is no circuit breaker for Bitcoiners. We are alley cats. We live outside. We fight in the back of the Dunkin' Donuts fucking alleyway over old spoiled milk with other cats, okay? We kill birds for our food, our sustenance. That is what we do. And we live in the dirt. We live in the fucking dirt, man. We get into the details of things and we deal with base level reality every day as investors. Whereas I don't see that in the traditional markets quite as much. In the traditional markets, it's like, I'm just buying
Yeah.
broad market index funds, and everything goes up because of money printing. The end. You know?
If you want to keep your Bitcoin safe for the long haul so that you too can have a seat at the table after the great monetary reset, then head to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use promo code Walker for 5% off the fully open source, Bitcoin only BitBox02 hardware wallet. Then get your Bitcoin off the exchange and into your own self-custody. The BitBox02 is easy as hell to use whether you are brand new to Bitcoin or you are a well-seasoned psychopath. Again, it is Bitcoin only, and it is fully open source. You can go to their GitHub and verify for yourself. Please do not trust me. Plus, when you go to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use promo code Walker, not only do you get 5% off, but you also help support this fucking podcast. So thank you. Now, first of all, now I'm picturing you as an alley cat, Hodl. So just a great visual. Preston, I'm going to need you to make a little meme-based video of that later. But I think that's such a good point. So for reference, like Carl and I got in 2020. So like, just like when they started sending out checks, and that, for me, that was the moment that I realized, oh, something's really wrong here with how things are working. Like, first of all, they're locking us down. Now they're sending us checks. Like, something. That's when I just started going deep down the Bitcoin and monetary rabbit hole. And I think there's a lot of class of 2020 folks out there, like a lot, who, like myself, most of the time has been pretty painful. Like there was a pretty, great run up and everything. And that's great. Like, oh, I'm a genius. And then like all that doubt creeps in when it starts going back down. And then it went back up again. We're like, oh, genius again. Like, suck it, friends. And then goes back down again. And then we languish in the lows of the bear market for what felt like an eternity. And now it starts pumping back up again. And it's all the way down to whatever it is, 58K gang right now. Or maybe it's 59. Either way, it's always 58. 58K gang's right. But it's like, you're absolutely right that every time Bitcoin just takes a dive, you kind of like, at least I still get this little sense of like, oh shit, here we go again. But then there's like this weird calm that comes over. And I'm like, well, you know what I didn't do enough of last time when I had this feeling was buy more Bitcoin. And this time I'm not going to make that same mistake. And I'm going to go out and I'm going to touch some grass and I'm going to hang out with my wife and my son. And I'm going to realize that my time horizon is more than just a couple of days or weeks or months. My plans are measured in centuries, or at least decades. But like I think that is it's a really nice forcing factor for becoming as you said, a better person. Like that's a pretty cool tool. It's a nice second order effect of Bitcoin. And holding Bitcoin is like that, forcing you to think more long term, to truly not sweat the small stuff, and to realize like if you just are patient, you will be rewarded. But patience is a virtue for a reason, right? It's not easy, but we're getting more and more patient people.
You can't make it through a downturn of a year, or like a bear market that lasts a year, if it wasn't truly savings. Right. So like if you were buying something and let's just say that you had this windfall that came in and you could stay above water for 3 months, like you can't own Bitcoin. It's just too volatile for you because you can't hold on to it for a year and let it get back to where it was if it wasn't truly savings that you could plow away forever. Because that's like the definition of somebody who's truly a net producer, is they can keep doing it month and month over again, and they never have to tap into it because they're making more money the following month. And so Bitcoin just finds its hands into the fittest. That's what it is.
There are investors.
It has no other choice.
There are investors out there who have stories about, a 90% drawdown on their net worth, and often it happens to them once. It's happened to me 4 times. Okay, that's a lot of times, man. That's a lot of times. Okay, it's probably going to happen 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 more times before I reach the finish line.
What is the finish line?
I
that
think
was a
this ends
setup.
with us all getting our own planet. You know, it's a lot like
Okay. All
Dune
right.
or Mormonism
Nice.
or the combination of
Okay.
the two.
So it's we all have our own wives, and there's like multiple wives per planet. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure how the Mormonism factors in
You're
there,
gonna
but
have to
like
work that out
you
with you
know,
and Carla. I don't know how you guys are gonna split it up. It's
you
not
know,
on me to. Yeah,
one's more than enough for me. I think. I don't know if I'm more power to those guys that can handle multiple. I'll stick with my one. You know, there
no.
is no second best
I
wife for
to
me.
give a serious answer. I think the finish line is us having a seat sort of at the table of power and being able to, you know, renegotiate terms and rule sets and be able to have a hand in rulemaking. And the rulemaking is essentially like we're bringing a fair distributed rule set for everybody that can't be changed in the middle of the game, and that's the thing we're bringing to the table. And we want that, as far and wide as we possibly can, and to restore, not really to progress, but to restore a lot of the things about American society that we've lost, a lot of principles we've lost along the way, while maintaining sort of our progression in terms of godlike technologies, right? So like recenter America in terms of principles and incentives, and then continue to progress on AI and robotics and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like the list, CRISPR, the list goes on.
I think that's again, America is a very special place, and obviously we're all three Americans. We have some bias, right? And America has done some horrible things, of course, as has like literally every group of people in every government to just about somebody across the long span of human history. America is just pretty young, and so but American ideals are really powerful. And I hope that, again, like you can't kill an idea, right? They're bulletproof. And no matter how much shit our currently corrupt elected or unelected bureaucrats throw at us, they can't kill that idea. And I think that that's what gives me hope for America still, is that there's still enough people out there who say, no, 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 no. I know what this is supposed to be like. I know, because I've read a book, that the people that founded our country were like 18 to 25. They were young, like truly young men who said, I'm going to put my life on the line for this country. Preston, you've literally put your life on the line for this country. And people like you, Preston, people like our founding fathers, they give me a lot of hope, because it's like, I mean, then again, it's like you look at an 18 to 25-year-old now and you're like, oh, we are so fucked, like they're, but I still have hope. And I think, one thing I would like to explore a little bit, because I think there's been a lot of talk lately about like, and there always will be probably until we die in the, red death of the sun. But there's been a lot of talk lately about, is Bitcoin money? Is Bitcoin something else? Is Bitcoin just a network? Like I've noticed this debate kind of resurfacing again with some extra force. And maybe I'm too simplistic, but I always think like, okay, well, lowercase b Bitcoin is money, and uppercase b Bitcoin is the monetary network and distributed consensus mechanism that allows for this money to be transmitted and for this rule set to be maintained. Is Bitcoin money? And also, as a follow-up to that, because this has been another hot topic of late, especially with Saylor's new MicroStrategy Orange, should people be able to do whatever the fuck they want on Bitcoin? And is that in any way risking Bitcoin's future as money, if it is money, as well, I believe, and maybe you believe as well?
Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, Bitcoin is an open, permissionless global monetary network. Trying to gatekeep an open, permissionless global monetary network is really stupid. Okay, listen, people are going to try every possible thing that can possibly be tried on Bitcoin. They're going to try it, and the things that the market will bear will continue to be a part of Bitcoin. The things that are within consensus and that the market will bear will continue to be a part of Bitcoin going forward. Does that mean that if Bitcoin has a non-monetary use case where it's being used for XYZ data storage application, whether it's identity or land title registry or blah, 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 tokenize this, tokenize that, does that mean that it negates the non-monetary use case of Bitcoin? No, especially not if, the vast amount of transactions are being spent on monetary use cases. At the same time, though, these non-monetary use cases are securing the Bitcoin network. So if you're holding Bitcoin, you are getting, because other people are choosing to spend it on NFT and digital identity and whatever else it is, you're receiving a marginal but tangible benefit in the terms of extra security for your monetary holdings, right? And so that is a synergistic system that seems to work. And for what time period or how temporary these non-monetary use cases are, I don't know. And I don't know if any of them will proliferate or will sustain into the future. I don't think many of the ones we see today, like my take is like probably not. I don't even think this MSTR decentralized identity thing is going to be around, but like, so what? Let them try. You know what I mean? Let them try and do it. And we're going to have a free market competition for block space. And then we're also going to, you should also expect people to maximally use whatever block space is available because Bitcoin is a commons. That's the other problem too. So like, I don't know. There's a lot to chew on. There's a lot of nuance. And it's very, I hate these simplistic, are you anti this? Are you pro that? Bro,
Agreed.
you being silent about cat pictures on the blockchain is because you're complicit. I just want you to know that. It's like, shut the fuck. I don't care. I just don't care.
Well, silence is violence,
Silence is violence,
as we've
exactly.
learned.
Your silence is deafening, Walker. It's deafening.
Yeah, it is.
That's commie behavior whenever you talk like that.
It is. And Preston, I'm curious of your take on this.
So Bitcoin's definitely money. Bitcoin is, if we were going to go deeper than that, I mean, it's just you're storing the energy that you have spent. Like, let's say I added some type of efficiency to Hodl as he's performing some job, and I own that product or service, and he's willing to pay me for it because it's just cheaper for him to pay me for that product or service than him try to do it himself because I have some type of specialization or competitive edge on providing that product or service. He's willing to pay me for it. He pays me for it, and I'm storing and I'm freezing that energy capture that benefited him and obviously benefited me because he paid me for it, and I'm just freezing that in time. And I can tap into that anytime I want without any line loss of that energy disappearing. That's what Bitcoin is. So if you want a lot of Bitcoin, find a way to add a whole lot of value to as many people as possible in the world by making a product or service that provides efficiency to them that they are willing to pay for so that they don't have to do it themselves because it's harder for them to do it themselves. Figure out how to do that and you'll have a ton of Bitcoin. It'll just naturally flow into your hands. And if you preserve it in Bitcoin, you're not going to have it erode like it does in this fiat system. And based on how much growth rate I suspect and many other people suspect is still going to occur in this network relative to the fiat network that exists today, I think it's going to outperform and tremendously outperform a lot of equity that is also accretive in value for people, but not necessarily because of the way it's been priced in fiat terms against Bitcoin. Okay, so that's why I think it's money. With respect to all the decentralized identification stuff that's happening with MicroStrategy or using the additional block space for data itself, I have, there are rules that if you follow these rules, you can participate in the network any way that you want. If we think that those rules are unfair or disrupting and destroying the incentive structure of somebody storing $1 billion worth of buying power that costs them a couple bucks to put there, if we think that that incentive is being disrupted and broken or being compromised, well, then we as a community and humans that are participating on this network should do something about the rule set and try to garner support to change that rule set. And if we don't get enough people to change that rule set And we're saying this is the left and right limits. And there's people saying, okay, well, I can play inside of those left and right limits. Well, they should be allowed to play inside of those left and right limits any way that they want. And you know what? If we actually believe the incentives are still intact, which I believe they are, because you can store $1 billion for like next to nothing, and I don't have to worry about the government like confiscating that billions in buying power. That's why the incentive structure is not being compromised today, despite these swoopty things you can do with the data. Well, then I'm just going to take a step back and say, well, let's let this play out. Let's see if the market's willing to pay for some of these things on the block space. Now, MicroStrategy's orange specifically. I believe they're still going to have, if they're performing some type of KYC activity in order to provide an orange check mark that's being written into the block space, that KYC activity is going to have to be signed by a master MicroStrategy account in order for that, orange check to be integrated with the Microsoft system or any other type of enterprise software for verification and validation to take place. So is that decentralized in and of itself? That activity is not for the KYC. The fact that they're storing the hash of the data for the verification on the blockchain is a decentralized use of storing that hash. Yes. So when I'm looking at it, I'm saying, okay, like there's something there. They don't have to store that data, or they don't have to worry about that data being compromised once they write it into the truth chain. But as far as the actual KYC part of it, there's still a centralizing force there where you have to trust MicroStrategy in order to perform that KYC and then sign it with a master account for it to be valid. So, I mean, am I super excited about it? Do I think that it could catch on? Maybe. I don't know. Do I think that the way that Microsoft currently does identification, verification, and all of the data and back end and having centralized servers, is it better than that? Probably. Is it 10x better than that? I don't know. And that's usually a really good way to kind of look at whether this is going back to what is money. If you're going to create a product or service that is going to make a lot of money and send a lot of Bitcoin into your coffers because you're creating value for society, you typically want it to be about a 10x value prop for anybody that's using legacy software or a legacy system over what they've got right now. I don't know if that's a 10x value capture. Maybe it is. Let's see what happens. Let's let the market test it out. Here's the thing that you would think all Bitcoiners would be for. This thing called a free and open market. Let's see what happens, right?
In regards,
my thoughts.
In regards to the change in rule set that Preston was talking about, like I do think that, yeah, of course, people can come together and they can lobby others to change the rule set, but we should have a culture where that is rare. It's actually pretty rare to make changes. And then we also should have a culture where we're building towards some endpoint where no more changes occur, because the change process is political in nature, and it's, Bitcoin is not meant to be a political system. And so we need to rid ourselves of that at some point in time. And again, on the rare point, that means that if we are going to have these changes occur rarely, that you might have to sit with things in Bitcoin that are uncomfortable or even lead you to believe that Bitcoin is broken for much longer than you might want. And you're just going to have to stop being a little bitch and fucking deal with that, okay? Freedom means other people get to do things you don't like. That's what freedom is. If you're European, it might be the first time you've ever heard the concept. Welcome.
Hilarious. Two things on that. One, there's a great quote by Mises that's basically like the free market means that, and freedom in general means that you have the right to be foolish. That's what it means. You have the right to make mistakes, because and it's very, very true. The other point is that I think people get thrown off by the idea of ossification, thinking that it's like a decision that is made versus a process that happens.
Yes.
Like it is not a discrete event. It is a continuous event. And ossification can happen naturally and unintentionally as well, as was the case. Jameson Lopp has spoken about this and written about this a lot with SMTP. And so I think it's like, and it's also important to separate. I think in this debate, so much nuance gets lost because people are like, well, you don't want Bitcoin to change. Well, don't you understand that software needs maintenance? And it's like, of course it does. And we can also separate change, like massive changes that you're talking about, Hodl, which can and should take a great deal of time and deliberation, with the regular upkeep and maintenance of software that is very much required to maintain a functioning code base. But so much of it just kind of devolves into like either you're a non-technical Luddite or you are a tinkering engineer who just wants to put your mark on something. And I think most of the truth is probably in the middle. And I think that the people that are working on, around, and for Bitcoin generally have pretty good intentions, like unless we're just fully infiltrated by spooks. But even if that's the case, the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that ultimately if people are operating in their self-interest, the game theory is such that they will not want to make any changes that break Bitcoin. Because if you have any sort of material amount of wealth saved in Bitcoin, that would be very much not in your best interests. And that's kind of a beautiful thing. It's like you're okay. Like you're shooting, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face, basically. And so it's, I have a lot of trust in this trustless system, may I say. But yeah, freedom means the freedom to make mistakes and be foolish and be a fucking idiot and do stuff that hurts you so that you get smarter. And that's how America was able to leapfrog everyone else in the entire fucking world in a couple hundred years, being just a colony of fucking insurrectionists. Like, because we just fucked around and found out and then fucked around again, found out more and iterated and got better. Like that's what freedom means. Anyway, get off my little soapbox now. I'm one other thing I kind of wanted to generally talk about, like, was, okay, with regard to the kind of samurai, and also now that you saw that Phoenix Wallet pulled out of the US, Wasabi pulling out of the US, like, yes, you can use a VPN for certain of these functions, like, sure, but the larger trend of that, I'm curious if you think, like, we have some lawmakers who are vocally pro Bitcoin, and I think that that's a great thing. It is certainly a tiny minority of them. Do you think we start to see a trend where, again, lawmakers, elected officials get smart by force, not by choice, and realize, the whole, look, you're going to push innovation offshore, which we very much see happening. Like, it's not just a trope, it's a reality. I mean, America literally pushed a lot of innovation and manufacturing offshore in a very purposeful way so that we could export our inflation to other parts of the world and, again, be a net consumer versus a net producer as we were previously. Do you think we start to see a change here, or do you think in some respects the die has been, the dice have been cast and like you're too far gone? I think we're certainly too far gone to start onboarding manufacturing back to the U.S., but that is a different sort of capital intensity and workforce skill level that is required for a lot of that, versus software, which is borderless. It would be a shame if the U.S. closed itself off from so much of this because people are terrified of what is supposed to be a country that operates under the rule of law, which seems to be operating under the rule of just rules now, not even laws, just rule making versus law making. Like that's what's scary to me. It's like people being scared that they may fall under a certain rule that is not even necessarily like codified law or been really clarified in a meaningful way by any courts, but they're just like, I'm not taking that risk. I don't want to go to jail, and I don't blame people. I don't want to go. I've got a family. I don't want to go to jail. Like, where do you think we're at with that? And again, when it comes to bucking that trend, does it just come down to, okay, either high level changes at leadership or parallel systems being built out by people who say, well, maybe I do go to jail, but, I'm okay with that. It's a loaded question, I know.
I'm thinking through it.
I'll go. I'll go on this. So, at the end of the day, it goes back to a comment that I made earlier in the show, which is I think that when you look at how much financialization and how much banking happens here in the United States relative to other parts of the world, this is a massive industry inside the United States is banking and just finance in general. If you don't think that they're behind the FinCEN proposal and the execution of all of this to force, if you're going to play ball in the United States, it's going to be through some type of custodied service from a payment standpoint. And if it's not custodied by some entity on your behalf inside the United States, you're not welcome here. And we're going to use everything we've got with the DOJ through FinCEN, all the stuff that's gone through with FinCEN to enforce and to scare the living hell out of anybody that's trying to give an individual the ability to custody from a payment standpoint. Okay, that's the message. And I don't think that they're going to back down from that, regardless of who's in party or who the party is. And the reason why is because behind these politicians are the banks who are scared to death of this. Okay. And if you think that they're just going to not pay off the next person who's in charge, whether that's Republican or Democrat, it's because you're super naive and you don't understand how the game's being played. So you just really have to look at the incentives to understand why the actions that we're seeing. Now, all the countries that don't have deep banking and financial services as a core industry, I think what you're going to find is they are going to open. They're going to be welcoming these developers and people with open arms to come on into our domains and our jurisdictions and build. Come here and build. Now, I hope I'm really wrong about that. I hope that some of this gets reversed, and with maybe a new administration, maybe we see a tide and a change of the guard with respect to some of this, and a lot of the FinCEN proposal gets unwound. I'm very suspect of that. And it's not me trying to be a pessimist. It's me just looking at the incentive structure and looking at the size of the financial industry. And I'm saying they cannot, they're going to be deader than a doornail if they just let this take root. So I think that's the game theory kind of playing out right before our eyes. That doesn't mean I like it. In fact, I actually hate it. And I think it's very bad for America and any other developed nation state that's leaning into these policies. But I think with enough time, it's a losing battle. That is a losing hand, but it's a short-term stop the bleeding hand that's being played.
So with the exception of one of the Samurai devs, I believe that all of the Samurai guys and all of the Whirlpool people were outside the U.S., right? And so the U.S. hegemony is so large, the dollar hegemony is so large that it doesn't matter where in the world you are. The extremely long dick of Uncle Sam can fuck you from anywhere, right? So you have to be very careful, even if you're not an American, when you're interacting with Americans and when you're interacting with U.S. dollars. If you're doing those two things, you are going to be subject to U.S. regulating authorities, right? Like number one. And then number two, I think Preston is dead on the money about, them, the bank, it's Wall Street and it's DC, and they're both against Bitcoin as medium of exchange. And DC is especially against Bitcoin as unit of account, obviously, right? Because that's the dollar's role. So is medium of exchange. That's the dollar's role. Is how they both see it. And they don't want to let Bitcoin escape from the walled garden they think they're creating. They're trying to ghettoize Bitcoin. They're trying to co-opt to Bitcoin. It should be obvious to everybody who's paying attention. And store of value is meaningless. It's for a long time I've been saying that like Wall Street and Bitcoin, we are ambivalent. We have a totally ambivalent relationship. And the reason why is because we are only aligned on number go up. They are not aligned on freedom tech in the slightest. And as Bitcoiners, obviously that's anathema to some of our worldview, right? But at the same time, listen, I mean, you're a meat puppet that lives on government land, and like they can throw you in a cage if you're doing things that are deemed to be illegal. So you got to be smart, and you got to be legal in your operations, and you got to like go through the long journey of seeing Bitcoin through. And if it does reach a period of co-option, attempted co-option, shadow prohibition, whatever we might be facing down the barrel, whatever we're looking down the barrel of right now, you need to be in it playing the long game. You need to be in it for the long term, because this is a generational project, and it's not like it's going to be easy, bro, to separate money and state. It's going to be really fucking hard. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of human effort. Like if you showed up thinking, "Oh, next month we're separating money and state," like, I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen. This is a really big deal. And the weird thing is, at the same time that all this is going on, and this is the backdrop, right? We're going to be getting rich in terms of number go up, but we're going to be like getting rich and losing freedoms, getting rich and losing freedoms, and it's going to feel weird and dysphoric. But my optimistic perspective of it is that it's not permanent, that it's a temporary state of affairs, and that as Bitcoiners become richer, that they will be able to have a seat at the table of power and be able to help rewrite some of these rule sets to say what is and is not fair. I mean, look at like the people that are in power now. A lot of them were, Woodstock hippies, or they were part of the Weather Underground or the Black Panther movement or whatever. And now they all have a seat at the table. Now they're all telling us, how we have to live, and they're wokeifying our society. So they won. They did a long march through the institutions, similar to the Maoist insurrection in China, and they won. Good for them, but they're also extremely old, and it's not going to last very long, right? Nothing is permanent in American life, and it's a long journey ahead of us. So hunker down for the winter.
You mentioned just that store of value doesn't really matter, and I think you meant that in the context, I believe, of just like it doesn't matter to the people who are pulling the strings. It doesn't matter to Wall Street. It doesn't matter to DC. Like they don't care too much. Is that what you meant, or do you mean in a more like general sense?
Their store of value is Apple stock and houses in the Hamptons and foreign real estate and Cayman shell corporations. Those are their stores of value, right? And Bitcoin, and also Bitcoin. Bitcoin will be one of their stores of value as well. You know what I mean? It's an infinite container for wealth. It's extremely good at storing value. They're going to want Bitcoin too. So what I'm saying is that store of value doesn't allow them to weaponize political ideology against rivals the same way medium of exchange does. Look at what happened with Russia and the SWIFT system when their action against Ukraine took place. Right, the minute they invaded Ukraine, we cut them off of SWIFT. We weaponized our treasury system against them. The dollar is a weapon, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's America's largest weapon. The nuclear arsenal is second.
Yeah, that's it's very true, and it's also very dark, right? And it's also the weapon that is easiest to use without people saying you're attacking us, right? Because hey, we're not shedding any blood, right? We're not beheading anyone. We're just cutting you off. But it's like it all comes back to, do you really have any freedoms if you don't have the freedom to transact freely? Because anything else you want to do, like, okay, freedom of speech, great. Well, where do you want to speak? Like, do you want to go somewhere? You want to go to fly somewhere and speak at a protest? Well, I'm sorry, that card's been declined. Also, you're on the no-fly list. Do you want to say it online? Well, sorry, your ISP is now blocking you, and we're not going to accept your payments, and your bank accounts have been frozen. You can't even afford those payments anyway. Like, you want a freedom of religion? You want to build a church? I'm sorry, you have your accounts have been frozen again. Like, so much of it, and it sounds, I think people sometimes come after Bitcoiners a bit because they say, like, you're being overly reductionist. You're being too simplistic. You're saying that Bitcoin fixes this, but like, look at all these problems we have. How can Bitcoin possibly fix this? And I think that what they miss is that when the base layer of what you're working with is so irrevocably broken, nothing else matters. Anything else you try to do is a Band-Aid. You're not curing the disease. You're slapping a Band-Aid on a oozing ulcer that is just going to keep growing and growing and growing. It's not going to it might make you feel a little bit better for a second. It might look good. It might be like, yes, I'm doing something. But you're not. You're just pretending that the deeper disease doesn't exist, or you're completely ignorant of it in the first place. But on that somewhat dark, ulcerated note, I'd like to end and be conscious of both of your scarce time, which I, again, appreciate you sharing with me. But I want to end on kind of a positive note. And so maybe just what makes you hopeful? If that one you'd rather not answer, what piece of uplifting advice would you give to somebody who is looking at the world right now and saying, man, everything seems just screwed, and like there doesn't seem to be a way out of this, and how do I possibly have hope in a time when it's so easy to be nihilistic?
I guess I can go first. So, people ask me all the time, oh my God, why are you not, super worried about this or whatever? When I went to combat, it sucked. This is pretty much the worst experience a person could ever go through. And it was horrific. It was, the location was terrible. What I experienced was terrible. But what that experience gave me was context. If you're going to paint a picture, you need the poles of the colors in order to create the contrast in order to paint the picture. For me in my life, when I look at that experience that I went through, it's provided this backdrop and this context for happiness and abundance and how bad things could be and how amazing they can be. What people are going through right now, they might be struggling really bad. And what I would say is it's the context to your life's picture that you're painting yourself. And you have this massive opportunity to harness this thing. Since I found Bitcoin nearly a decade ago, my life just keeps getting better every single day. It really does. And I'm not saying that to sound like a jerk. I'm saying it because other people can have this same opportunity. As long as they're producing some type of excess in their life and they can preserve it and freeze it into this thing that's going to help be their salvation as they're moving forward in their life, that they're not going to continue to be robbed from with the work and the energy that they've already performed, and that they can cash that in whenever they want to cash it in the future. So the future is very bright. From a macro standpoint, you're looking at what these countries are going to go. There's going to be hardship. There's going to be pain. There's going to be a lot of variance and volatility in what's taking place with this reset. And you know what? That's life. That's any life. That's nature, that you're going to be going through such volatility. So I guess my recommendation for people is embrace the chaos. Enjoy the chaos. When you have a bad day, it's just providing that backdrop and that contrast for you to appreciate tomorrow when it's better. I feel so blessed to be a part of this movement, to be around people like both of you two. And I just, it's in the eye of the beholder as to where you're going to focus your energy, what you're going to work on, and how you're going to provide value for other people that's going to bring you true pleasure in your life. We were talking about like the finish line. The finish line is how can you add more value and abundance and happiness to other people's lives? Because in that process, what you're going to find is you're making yourself extremely happy and fulfilled yourself. So what an opportunity to be sitting here at these crossroads in this great reset, to figure out a way to re-engineer and rewire the world for efficiency and abundance for others. What an opportunity.
Hey, man. I think the biggest piece of advice I would give to anybody, especially somebody who's young, is tell the truth. Just broadly. Because I think a lot of us are used to using lies to get through, to make compromises, to deal with things that are very hard to cope with. And I think that those lies build up a lot of dead wood around us and cause us to be unable to move freely. And they cause us to be unable to live the life that we're supposed to live. And I don't know if you've seen this with a family member, but, I've been there with people who've lived their life in this manner at the end of their life when they're on hospice care. And it's like there's a boulder sitting on their chest they can't get out from under. And the reality of what they could have been is crushing them in that moment. And if you've ever seen that and experienced that, you will do anything not to become that. And speaking the truth out loud is scary. That's why people don't do it. Because when you start saying things that are true, a lot of the lies that you've built up around yourself are going to come tumbling down, and you're not going to be able to live in the dissonance any longer, and you're going to be exposed and vulnerable, right? But also, life becomes very beautiful. Suddenly, the right people, they gravitate towards you. You find yourself in better environments, the right environments. You find yourself on the path that you're supposed to be. If things are very clear to you, you're looking out in the distance and your life's trajectory is obvious, it's probably because you're on somebody else's path. If you're on your own path, it'll be sort of murky. You'll be feeling your way through. So start saying what you think is true. Don't just type it anonymously on Twitter. Say it out loud with your full chest. Stand behind it. Say it to the people in your real life. And it will take you where you need to go. I promise you. And then in terms of like what makes me hopeful, it's the thing that makes me the most hopeful is all of the people that are waking up to what's going on in the world. And it's not just in Bitcoin, but it's everywhere now. There was a Palestinian Israeli protest the other day. I don't know where in the world it was, but it was a bunch of young people. So it was probably on some college campus. It might have been at UCLA. And the Israeli side and the Palestinian side were both chanting, "Fuck Joe Biden." That's beautiful, man. That's America. They they both hated the president for totally different reasons. I mean, come on. If that doesn't make you hopeful that the American spirit is still alive, we're an unruly people. We're supposed to be unruly and free and dirty and unwashed and crass. That is the American ethic and ethos. Live free, baby, or die. Okay?
I love it.
love it.
What a beautiful note to wrap up on. One thing I will just point out is that Preston did say "eye of the beholder," but I guess Hodl, you'd say "eye of the behodler," and that sounds totally normal and natural to you, which is fine.
Yeah. Sounds gay. It sounds a little gay. Sounds like a gay thing. You know.
You said it, not me. But well, guys, I want to thank you both a lot. You're two people in this space who I've had the pleasure of meeting in person a number of times now, and it's really it's always enlightening talking to you both, and I appreciate the way you approach things, and I appreciate your positivity and also your ruthless logic that comes across, because I think that that's really important, and I think it's important for people to hear these sorts of hopeful messages. Again, there's a lot of shit, excuse me. There's a lot of shit going down. Whoa.
That sounded good. Keep it going. No, keep it going.
No, don't take a sip.
That was the radio voice walking.
No.
There's a lot of shit going down, people.
There's a lot of shit going down. No, but there is a lot of shit going down. But there's so many reasons to be hopeful. There's not a small one of them being the people that you have a chance to meet through this incredible space.
Yes.
So I want to thank you both. Thank you for your time. I'll link your Noster and Twitter, I guess, in the show notes. And I look forward to seeing you both in the flesh soon. And thank you both again for your time.
Bro, before we go, I'm just going to say I was in the UK with Preston and Jeff Booth, and I left the bar at 3:30 a.m., and these savages were still going hard, bro. I left before them. Jeff Booth was partying like an animal. It was amazing.
I mean, honestly, the Canadians will surprise you. Like you never know what they're going to pull out. They're an unruly bunch too. They're just more polite about their unruliness, I think.
There's no way I could let Jeff Booth stay out later than me. I mean, come on.
I love it.
So good.
Well, I look forward to closing down the bar and having Preston, you, and Jeff outlast me next time we see each other.
Yes. Very important highlight there, Hodl.
Yeah. And that's a wrap on this Bitcoin Talk episode of the Bitcoin Podcast. If you're a Bitcoin-only company interested in sponsoring another fucking Bitcoin podcast, head to bitcoinpodcast.net/sponsor. If you're enjoying the Bitcoin Podcast, consider giving a 5-star review wherever you listen or sharing this show with your network. Or don't. Bitcoin doesn't care. You can find me on Nostr by going to primal.net/walker. And if you want to follow the Bitcoin Podcast on Twitter, go to @TitcoinPodcast and @WalkerAmerica. You can also find the video version of this podcast at youtube.com/@WalkerAmerica and @WalkerAmerica on Rumble. Bitcoin is scarce. There will only ever be 21 million, but Bitcoin podcasts are abundant. So thank you for spending your scarce time to listen to another fucking Bitcoin podcast. Until next time, stay free.